Right then, folks. So I'm going to talk about FI Allergic in an ESTP and an ENTP. So an initiator artisan and a collaborator rational. And then I'm going to talk about writing an ENTP character and trying to get around the FI Allergic problem. So I think I put Richard Bandler first. So Richard Bandler is the co-founder of NLP. And he would talk about useful beliefs. And if somebody had a situation where a principle, now this is from his point of view, was getting in the way of feeling happy or monetary gain, he would say, what does that principle do for you? How does that principle benefit you? What do you get out of that? And so from his point of view, it's, well, that's not a useful belief. Why don't you change it? So for him, from that ESTP, it's beliefs are not coming from internally from a feeling based place. It's what is useful. And so you can see these sort of trends in NLP. And when you listen to Richard Bandler, and then you can get that thought process from the ESTP. And you can get the thought process from the ISTP, John Grinder, who's got more access to FI, and we'll talk about sort of ethics within NLP. Another thing Richard Bandler did is, and because of this lack of FI in ESTP, we can now then bring in a Kersey idea from Kersey temperament of the STPs being very utilitarian. So utilitarian is the opposite of by the book. It's just doing it, breaking the rules, being a maverick. And the ESTP is the most maverick of the types because there's no feeling there from the inside of, oh, that's not the right way to do it. It's which way is the greatest utility. And so ESTP is the type which is most likely to be the ends justify the means, because the means are completely open. It's utilitarian, it's expedient. As Kersey wrote in Personology, expedient is you get your foot out. Out foot, because of ped. So here I can give you another example. He was living in Hawaii at the time, and his son was thinking his son was too close to the rocks and could get damaged, because he needs to go further out, and so he needs to teach his son how to swim. And so what he did, at least what he says in his tale, because again he could make stuff up, another ESTP trait, that he paid other kids to tease him, and he put money at the bottom of a swimming pool, and they went after the money. He paid them to tease his son, to shame him into doing it. Now that would probably work on ESTPs. And then what he did is, there was this woman who had anorexia, and he had these guys to talk outside of a room about how unattractive she was because she was so thin. So these are extreme measures. Now, for an ESTP, it's like, that's not that extreme. That's not illegal. So, yeah, that's how extreme STPs can get. They can go into illegalities. But, yeah, so there's no FI involved there. It's ends justify the means thinker. So that kind of FI. So you can't really write that kind of character in Mole Dilemma because FI Allergic. The most you could do for an ESTP in that sort of situation, unless you bring in outside factors, is an ESTP dealing with the consequences of those beliefs later on in the effect on relationships. And again, if you want a bit more drama on it, you could build in, again, close relationships and that family drama. Yeah, and you can have maybe an older ESTP and one of the effects of that, and you can bring in other factors. Now, for Mark Linsenmayer, he was on a podcast, I won't name it, where he was going through various ethical systems, and he was saying even with deontology of the sort of universal rule of like, do you want to be on the receiving end? So, and he gave the example of do unto others as you would have others do unto you, and he said, yeah, but what if you're a masochist? So then it's like, come on, I treated you really badly. Do it to me. It's the kind of thing maybe a masochist would want in that situation. But and they might say, "Oh, DIY." But the point is, though, he has no. And when he was talking about these moral systems, he was distanced from each of these sort of moral systems. So there's a feeling of there's nothing coming from within in terms of right and wrong. It depends on the system. And so you then start thinking about, well, then you get the archetype of ENTP, where, I mean, really the archetypal role for ENTP is debater, not the inventor, because what percentage of ENTPs are inventors? But there's a very high percentage of ENTPs who have pretended to have one position and win an argument from a position that they don't actually believe in, just to actually show the debating skills. And I actually have a video on this channel with an ENTP, and he was only in one video, where he actually said, oh, I'm just sharpening my debate skills. So the ideal for the that kind of ENTP is winning arguments, debating one side, and then the next night have the same argument and win the same argument, but from the other side. Because there's almost no dog in the hunt. Is that the right phrase? Yeah, no dog in the hunt in terms of being invested in a particular point of view from a feeling place. Now then, so those kind of characters, putting them in soliloquy, those kind of pure ENTPs and ESTPs, putting those into soliloquy and trying to get some kind of moral dilemma out of them in a conflict, very difficult. And it's going to be, oh, what's the most useful action I can take that will benefit me most? So, I mean, that might be interesting to go through the sort of the cynical thought process. So, now there's a couple of things with, however, there is a solution. So I'm pretty darn sure that Peter Schiff here, ENTP, collaborator rational, but there's some sort of external factors with him, and that is maybe it is through the TI and through the Austrian School Economics and all the libertarian stuff, and through the example of his dad being locked up effectively as a political prisoner, and it being illegal for him to sell a book. So basically, he's pretty much the only the second person to have been censored by the US government up to that point. Yeah. And so, from the example of his father, you could argue that Peter Schiff has internalized a lot of FI stuff about constitutional rights and that lot. And you could argue that what you have there is a blend of FE and TI. Because he is very much of the position of, if you're a constitutionalist, and literally what it says in the Federalist Papers, the federal government can only do those 18 things which the Constitution says it can. And then the 10th Amendment actually reiterates that and actually says those powers not delegated to the federal government nor withheld from the states are reserved to the states. So, for example, an example of a power which is withheld from the state is the right to enter into treaties with foreign nations. That is a power withheld from the states. And so the actual organization of the Constitution is the federal government can do these 18 things. And the states cannot do these things. And so if the Constitution says that the states can't do a particular thing, they can't do it. But if it's not listed, if it's not there as you can't do this, then the states can do it. But it's the other way around for the federal government. It can only do what is listed. So actually, federal relief for flood victims because of the hurricane, unconstitutional. It's not there as a federally delegated power. Right. And so he is told to taken all of that on board, and that's in there with his libertarianism. And so what you have with Peter Schiff is you have a value set that he feels. And when he gets into this, is you can hear that he's really feeling it. He's not like Mark Linsenmayer and having this sort of distanced, all of these positions are all kind of different and sort of no dog in the hunt. He has a dog in the hunt, and he has invested in that, although Peter Schiff can still have FI allergic moments, such as when he went through, the false allegations of certain accusers of a Supreme Court justice. I won't go into that because I'm not FI allergic. I'm not going to repeat the kind of jokes that Peter Schiff made about that. Now, eventually it was proved right because holes were found in the false testimony, but, it has a little bit of a dodgy feeling about it. Now then, so I would say that Peter Schiff has, I would actually say that his trifix is, there's a 7 in there. He frequently talks about human nature and what people would say, and people would take the money or whatever, and they would take advantage of a certain program and all of this. And it's like, I can see the 7 in there. I can see the 3 in there. He's been highly successful business-wise. And from all of these other things, I can see a 1 in there. Extremely unusual for an ENTP. And when I've come to write Wilma, I've put a 1 in there. So Peter Schiff has been a big influence on Wilma. But what I added with Wilma was a strong faith. Yeah, and so just getting a set of values and that lot to get it. Because like I said, it's difficult to get these character moments where it's what a character really feels and where it's coming from the inside. And so you get a blend there of TI and FI. As for the ESTP character, again, there's other, don't really want to get in that because of spoilers, but you'll see that in the first season of Wilma Housemates. And if I get this made, I'm going to say, how's that for TE getting this made on no money? Right. Right. So, yeah. So the way I approach characters is the characters usually have a 1 fix. So you can see these names here for the characters. And you might barely see Wilma, Rena, Laura, Tel, Kerr, Tamsi, Jay, Anna. So how many of these have a 1 fix? Or 1 wing? Right, 1 fix, 1 wing, 1 wing, 1 fix, 1 fix. Actually, there's no 1 for Kerr. And there's no 1 with these 3. But in that case, I've given Jay and Anna a 2. Now with Kerr, I do have FI stuff which comes through. Yeah, but you'll have to sort of see the progress of that particular character, because he does end up, he has a different viewpoint by the end of A6 compared to A1, because he is quite cynical. Yeah, and I'm going to give you some harmonic speech for you. Kerr the girthy nerd. So, Kerr, girth, nerd. The repetition of that sound. Kerr the girthy nerd. Right. Right, so that's some on FI and a bit on these characters. Now as for casting. Cast and committed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'd say, that I've seen act. That I've seen act and are good. Yeah, and then this one, particular Wilma actress, a genius, but I'm not going to mention her name because I have to get a commit to commit, you know. Right, there'll be a process. Right, basically record everything else, and then I'll say to that particular actress, "It's all done. You are the final piece." Right, because as you know, trying to organize stuff with ENFPs can be like herding cats.